6 inches. That's how close Adelaide Thorne was to 4-year-old Rosalie when the gunfire erupted. Silas Gray's weapon aimed at the child's small body. She had 3 seconds to decide stay hidden behind the shipping container where she was safe or throw herself between the bullets and the girl who called her mama. Adelaide chose the girl. She always chose the girl. But that moment, that impossible choice, that defining instant where Adelaide discovered exactly how brave she could become, that came later. 3 months later to be precise. And it all started with something much simpler than guns and warehouses and life or death decisions. It started with wine. The first bill arrived on a Tuesday. Past due notice, printed in red ink that looked too much like blood. Adelaide stared at it on her kitchen counter, the paper trembling slightly in the draft from her broken window. She'd tried to tape plastic over the crack, but November wind in Manhattan had no mercy. The second bill came Wednesday. Her sister's hospital. This one wasn't red. This one was white clinical professional. But the number at the bottom might as well have been written in her own blood. $200,000 for a heart that was failing, for a sister who was dying, for a surgery that needed to happen in 8 weeks, or Harper Thorne would never see her 29th birthday. Adelaide was 25 years old. She made $18,000 a year waiting tables at the Scarlet Rose, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. She served wine that cost more than her monthly rent. She smiled at people who wore watches, worth more than her entire life. And every night she went home to a 4th floor walk-up with a broken window and counted the days until her sister died. 8 weeks, 56 days. That's what the doctor said. 56 days to find $200,000 or lose the only family she had left. Adelaide folded the bill carefully, placed it in the drawer with all the others. Then she put on her black server's uniform, tied her hair back in a neat bun, and walked 7 blocks through the cold to the Scarlet Rose. Because rent was due in 3 days. Because Harper's medication cost $300 a week. Because giving up meant Harper died, and Adelaide Thorne had survived too much to give up now. The restaurant glowed like a jewel in the November darkness. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the kind of place where silence was expensive and poverty wasn't allowed through the door. Adelaide tied her apron, checked her reflection in the kitchen's steel surface. She looked tired. She was tired. Tired in her bones, in her blood, in the deep places where hope used to live. Table 7, the manager said without looking at her. VIP section, don't screw it up. Table 7 sat in the corner, positioned so everyone in the restaurant could see but no one could hear. Power seat, control position. Adelaide had worked at the Scarlet Rose long enough to recognize the geography of importance. She picked up her order pad, smoothed her apron, and walked into the light. The woman at table 7 wore white. Not ivory, not cream. White, pure as snow and twice as cold. Her dress probably cost 6 months of Adelaide's salary. Her jewelry caught the chandelier light and threw it back like weapons. Diamonds, platinum, markers of a life Adelaide would never understand. But it was her face that stopped the people. Beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Perfect bone structure, perfect skin, perfect everything, except her eyes. Her eyes were the coldest thing Adelaide had ever seen, and Adelaide had seen a lot of cold. Genevieve Ashford. Adelaide knew the name. Everyone who worked at the Scarlet Rose knew the name. You learned it in whispers, in warnings, in stories that ended with people losing their jobs or worse. Genevieve Ashford was engaged to Dominic Castellano, and Dominic Castellano owned half of New York. "Good evening," Adelaide said, keeping her voice neutral, professional, empty of everything except service. "Welcome to the Scarlet Rose. May I start you with something to drink?" Genevieve didn't look up. She was studying the wine list like it had personally offended her. "Bring me the 2015 Bordeaux," she said. Not a request, a command. The Chateau Margaux, chilled to exactly 55 degrees, not 54, not 56. 55. Of course, Adelaide wrote it down, checked it twice. When you serve people like Genevieve Ashford, you didn't make mistakes. Mistakes got you fired. Or worse. I'll bring that right away. She walked to the wine cellar, her footsteps silent on the marble. Selected the bottle carefully. Chateau Margaux 2015. $3,000 for wine that would be gone in an hour. She checked the temperature twice. 55 degrees exactly. Carried it back to table 7 like she was carrying nitroglycerin. Because in a way she was. Adelaide presented the bottle label, facing Genevieve. Opened it with practiced precision. Poured exactly 2 ounces into the tasting glass. Waited. Genevieve sipped, swallowed. Set the glass down with a click that sounded like a gunshot in Adelaide's mind. Wrong vintage, Genevieve said. Her voice was honey and razor blades. Sweet enough to draw you close, sharp enough to cut when you arrived. I ordered the 2015. This is clearly the 2016. Adelaide's heart dropped. She looked at the bottle. The label clearly read 2015. She checked it 3 times. She'd examined every detail. There was no mistake, the bottle was correct. But that wasn't the point, was it? Around them, the restaurant had gone silent. Other servers melted into the shadows. The kitchen staff paused at the service window, their faces pale. Even the piano player's fingers stopped moving, frozen above the keys mid-song. Everyone who worked at the Scarlet Rose knew what came next. They'd all seen it before. Genevieve would ask her questions, sweet and poisonous. Then, she would tear her victim apart piece by piece until they begged for mercy that never came. Adelaide had only been working here for 2 weeks, but she'd heard the stories. About the waitress who brought the wrong appetizer and ended up blacklisted from every restaurant in Manhattan. About the busboy who accidentally bumped Genevieve's chair and wound up in the hospital with 2 broken arms. About the manager who tried to defend his staff and lost his restaurant, his savings, and his family. In the span of a month, Genevieve Ashford destroyed people, and she enjoyed every second of it. Ma'am, Adelaide said quietly, her training taking over even as her survival instincts screamed at her to run. That bottle is the 2015 vintage you ordered. You can see the label from where you're sitting. But if you'd prefer something different, I'm happy to bring you another selection. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Genevieve's smile disappeared. She stood slowly, deliberately. Her chair scraped against the marble floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. She was tall, taller than Adelaide, especially in heels that probably cost more than Adelaide's car. Her dress moved like water. Her jewelry caught the light like stars. "Are you?" Genevieve said, each word precise and deadly. "Calling me a liar?" Adelaide felt every eye in the restaurant burning into her back. She knew what the smart move was. Apologize, grovel, beg for forgiveness, accept whatever punishment Genevieve decided to inflict and count herself lucky if she only lost her job. But Adelaide was tired. Tired of struggling to pay rent after losing her research position at Meridian Financial 3 months ago. Tired of being invisible and insignificant. Tired of watching people like Genevieve destroy others for entertainment while everyone else just looked away. Most of all, she was tired of being afraid. Fear had ruled her life for too long. Fear in the foster homes, where she and Harper learned to make themselves small, to never draw attention to, survive by becoming invisible. Fear when the system split them up, sending Harper to one home and Adelaide to another. Fear every day of her childhood, until she turned 18 and could finally protect her sister the way Harper had always protected her. And now, Harper was dying. 8 weeks, 56 days. And Adelaide was supposed to bend and break for a woman who'd never known fear in her entire life now. Not today. "I'm not calling you anything," Adelaide said clearly, meeting Genevieve's cold eyes without flinching. "I'm stating a fact. The bottle is 2015. Your order was 2015. If there's a problem with the wine itself, I'll gladly replace it. But the vintage is correct." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Genevieve picked up the wine glass and threw it. The glass flew past Adelaide's head by inches. Crystal shattered against the marble floor behind her. Red wine exploded across white stone like arterial spray. Shards scattered in every direction, glittering under the chandeliers like broken stars. Adelaide didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She just stood there, looking at Genevieve with an expression that wasn't quite pity, but close to it, and that more than anything else seemed to enrage the other woman. "You arrogant little—" Genevieve started forward, her hand raised. "That's enough." The voice came from the corner of the restaurant, deep, absolute, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to command a room. Dominic Castellanos stood and the entire restaurant seemed to tilt toward him. He moved with the controlled grace of a predator, crossed the floor in smooth, measured steps. His suit was perfectly tailored, dark and expensive. His face was hard angles and sharp edges, the kind of face that revealed nothing. But his eyes were intelligent and calculating, missing nothing. Adelaide had seen him before, of course. He came to the Scarlet Rose 3 times a week, always alone, always in the corner booth. He sat in shadow and read things on his phone and left generous tips. She'd barely registered his presence because he seemed to want to be invisible. But now his attention was focused completely on their confrontation, and Adelaide understood why people feared him. Dominic Castellano didn't need to threaten. He just needed to exist. Genevieve's expression transformed instantly. The rage melted into sweetness. Her voice went soft, almost vulnerable. "Dominic, darling, this waitress has been incredibly disrespectful. She practically called me a liar in front of everyone. The bottle is 2015. Dominic's words cut through her explanation like a knife. Clean, precise, final. "You ordered it yourself 20 minutes ago. I heard you." The color drained from Genevieve's face, then rushed back in a flood of red. Her mouth opened and closed, searching for words that wouldn't come. Being contradicted by the staff was embarrassing. Being contradicted by her fiancé in front of witnesses was humiliating. "I must have been confused." Genevieve managed her voice tight as a wire. "I'm not feeling well. I should go home." She grabbed her designer purse, shot one last venomous look at Adelaide, and swept toward the exit, her shoulder slamming into Adelaide as she passed hard enough to make Adelaide stumble. The door crashed shut behind her. Slowly, like a held breath being released, the restaurant came back to life. Conversations resumed. The piano player's fingers found the keys again. Servers emerged from the shadows, moving like they'd been released from a spell. Dominic was still standing there. "What's your name?" he asked. "Adelaide Thorne, sir." "You're new 2 weeks." It wasn't a question. He knew. "Yes, sir." He just studied her for a long moment. His eyes were dark, intelligent, weighing and measuring. "You're not afraid of consequences." Adelaide met his gaze, held it. "I'm terrified of consequences," she corrected quietly. "But I'm more afraid of what happens to me if I let fear make all my decisions." Something shifted in his expression. Something that might have been respect or interest or recognition. "Interesting answer," he said. Then he walked back to his table, pulled out his phone and made a call. Adelaide finished her shift in a fog of adrenaline and dread. The other servers avoided her. The manager pulled her aside in a voice that trembled, told her she would need to find other employment. Nobody survived crossing Genevieve Ashford. "Pack your things. Pick up your last check Friday. Don't come back." She walked home through the cold November night, her coat pulled tight against the wind. Her apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned decades ago. The heat barely worked. The window was broken. But it was hers at least until the end of the month when her savings ran out and she couldn't pay rent anymore. She'd lost her job as an investigative researcher 3 months ago when Meridian Financial downsized. She'd spent 2 months burning through savings, sending out resumes. The waitressing job at the Scarlet Rose had been a lifeline. Minimum wage plus tips, barely enough to survive. Now that was gone too. Adelaide climbed the stairs to her apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her mind was already calculating. She had $200 in her checking account. Rent was $800. Harper's medication was $300 a week. The surgery was $200,000 and needed to happen in 8 weeks. The math didn't work. No matter how she arranged the numbers, they didn't add up to survival. She was reaching for her keys when she heard it. The sound of an engine, expensive and quiet. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb below, sleek as a shadow. The back window rolled down. Dominic Castellano looked out at her from the darkness. "Adelaide Thorne," he said. "Not a question, a statement. Get in. We need to talk." Every instinct screamed at her to run. This was how people disappeared in New York. Black cars and powerful men and conversations that ended in places you couldn't come back from. But Adelaide also knew that running was pointless. If Dominic Castellano wanted to find her, he would. And besides, what did she have left to lose? Harper was dying. She had no job. She was 8 weeks from watching her sister's heart give out. What was one more risk? She got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Dominic sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. The driver pulled away from the curb, smoothly heading north toward Central Park. "Where are we going?" Adelaide asked. "Nowhere specific. I wanted to have a conversation without an audience." Dominic studied her in the dim light. "You surprised me tonight. Is that why you're here, to punish me for embarrassing your fiancée? If I wanted to punish you, we wouldn't be having this conversation." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something. What did you do before you started waiting tables?" Adelaide hesitated, then decided that honesty was the only currency she had left. "I was an investigative researcher for Meridian Financial. They laid off half the department in August." "Investigative research," he nodded slowly. "That explains some things. You have that look, the one people get when they're trained to see patterns and ask questions." "What do you want from me, Mr. Castellano?" "I want to offer you a job." He said it simply, like he was offering her a cup of coffee. "I need a personal assistant, someone intelligent, observant, capable of thinking clearly under pressure, someone who isn't easily intimidated." His eyes held hers. "Someone who will tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable." Adelaide stared at him. Of all the things she'd expected, this wasn't on the list. "You don't know anything about me. I know you stood up to Genevieve when everyone else was too terrified to breathe. I know you didn't try to save yourself by blaming someone else. I know you're educated, experienced in research, and currently desperate for employment." He paused. "I know enough." Her mind raced. The offer was impossible, insane. Dominic Castellano was a criminal. Everyone knew it, even if no one could prove it. He controlled the shipping docks, the union contracts, the underground gambling operations. His name appeared in whispered conversations and coded messages. His influence reached into police departments, city hall, boardrooms across the East Coast. Working for him would mean entering a world of violence and corruption, but it would also mean security, money, a chance to stop drowning. "What would I be doing?" she asked carefully. "Managing my schedule, reviewing contracts, handling correspondence, coordinating meetings. I have legitimate business interests, real estate, shipping, logistics, consulting. You would help manage those." He smiled thinly. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal." "What about the illegal things?" "You'll never be asked to participate in those. You have my word." His word. The word of a man who ruled New York's underworld from the shadows. Adelaide should have laughed, should have refused, should have gotten out of the car and run as far as her legs could carry her. "The salary would be $200,000 a year to start," Dominic continued. "Health insurance, retirement benefits, all legal, all documented. $200,000. Adelaide made $18,000 at the Scarlet Rose. This was more money than she had ever imagined making. This was also a deal with the devil. "Why me?" she asked again. "Really? Because everyone else is afraid of me. They tell me what they think I want to hear. You don't do that." He leaned back. "When you looked at Genevieve tonight, you saw someone trying to control you through fear and you refused to play along. That's rare. That's valuable. The car had circled back to Adelaide's building. Dominic pulled a business card from his jacket and held it out. It was expensive stock with nothing printed except a phone number. "Think about it," he said. "You have until tomorrow evening. Call that number with your answer." Adelaide took the card. "What if I say no?" "Then you say no. You go back to your life and we never speak again." His eyes held hers. "But I don't think you will." "Why not?" "Because you're drowning, Adelaide Thorne, and I'm offering you a lifeline. The question isn't whether you'll take it. The question is whether you're brave enough to grab on even though you don't know where it leads." Adelaide got out of the car and stood on the cracked sidewalk watching the Mercedes disappear into the night. She looked down at the business card, at the simple phone number that represented a choice between safety and danger, poverty, and security, dying slowly, or risking everything for a chance to live. She went upstairs, made tea with water heated in the microwave because her stove didn't work, sat by the broken window and watched the city lights blur through the plastic she taped over the crack. Harper's face appeared in her mind. Her sister at 12 stepping in front of their foster father's raised fist. Taking the beating meant for Adelaide. Protecting her little sister the only way she knew how. Harper had never hesitated, had never counted the cost. She just acted. Maybe it was time Adelaide did the same. She called the number at 6 o'clock the next evening. "I'll take the job," she said when Dominic answered. "But I need something first." "Name it." "I need a $200,000 advance. My sister needs heart surgery. She has 8 weeks to live without it." Silence on the other end. Adelaide held her breath. She'd overplayed her hand, asked for too much. This was where he'd tell her no, where he'd done. Dominic said, "The surgery will be scheduled for tomorrow. You start Monday, 9 a.m., 525 Fifth Avenue, 42nd floor." He hung up before she could respond. Adelaide stood in her broken apartment, the phone still pressed to her ear, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Something dangerous and powerful and terrifying. Hope. Monday morning arrived wrapped in cold rain and grey clouds. Adelaide dressed carefully in the best suit she owned, bought second-hand but tailored to fit. She took the subway to Midtown, emerged into a world of glass towers and expensive shoes, and people who moved like they owned the air they breathed. 525 Fifth Avenue disappeared into the clouds. Adelaide stood outside for a long moment looking up. This was it, the point of no return. Once she walked through those doors, she would be part of Dominic Castellano's world. And leaving that world, she suspected wouldn't be as simple as giving notice. She went inside. The 42nd floor was elegant and understated. Hardwood floors, modern art, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city that reminded you exactly how high up you were, exactly how far you could fall. A receptionist directed her to Dominic's office with a smile that was professional and empty. He was already there, standing by the windows, talking on his phone in a language Adelaide didn't recognize. Russian maybe, or something Eastern European. He saw her, gestured for her to enter, finished his conversation, and ended the call. "You're early," he said. "That's good. I value punctuality. I value employment," Adelaide replied. That almost smile flickered across his face, the one she'd seen in the car. "Fair enough, let's begin." He showed her to her desk, her computer, her files. Explained the calendar system, the filing protocols, the people she'd be working with. Everything was organized, efficient, professional. Adelaide's researcher instincts kicked in immediately. She saw the structure, the logic, the careful separation between legitimate business and everything else. "Your primary focus will be on the legal operations," Dominic said. "Real estate acquisitions, shipping contracts, consulting agreements. I have lawyers and accountants who handle the details, but I need someone who can see the bigger picture. Someone who can spot problems before they become disasters." "What about Genevieve?" Adelaide asked. The question had been burning in her mind since she walked in. "She's not going to be happy about this. Genevieve doesn't work here." His voice was cold. "And after last night, she understands there are consequences for her behavior. She'll target me anyway." "Yes, Dominic agreed. She will. That's why you'll report any contact with her immediately. Silas Gray is my head of security. If there's ever a concern, you go through him. He called Silas in. The man who entered was tall and powerfully built, with cold blue eyes and a scar running down his left cheek. He looked at Adelaide with absolute indifference, like she was a piece of furniture that might need to be moved. Silas handles anything sensitive, Dominic explained. If there's ever a security concern, you go through him. Adelaide nodded, but something prickled at the back of her neck. There was something about Silas, something controlled and dangerous that made her uneasy. The way he looked at Dominic, the way he didn't look at her at all. She filed the observation away, old habits from her research days. Notice everything, trust nothing, wait for patterns to emerge. The first week was surprisingly normal. Adelaide managed Dominic's calendar, reviewed contracts, coordinated with lawyers and accountants. Everything seemed legitimate, legal, exactly what Dominic had promised. She began to relax. Maybe this really was just a job. Maybe she could work here, save money, help Harper recover, and eventually move on with her life. Then, Friday afternoon of her second week, Genevieve walked into the office without knocking. Adelaide was alone reviewing an acquisition contract for a property in Brooklyn. She looked up as the door opened, and her body went cold. Genevieve stood in the doorway, wearing white, pristine as armor. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Hello, Adelaide," she said, closing the door with a soft click. "We need to talk." Adelaide set down her pen carefully, kept her hands visible, kept her voice neutral. "Can I help you with something, Miss Ashford?" "Miss Ashford," Genevieve laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. So formal. But we both know this isn't about professionalism, don't we? She walked around the desk, slowly, deliberately invading Adelaide's space. Her perfume was overwhelming, expensive and suffocating. "I've been watching you." Genevieve continued, perching on the edge of Adelaide's desk. "The way Dominic looks at you, the way he actually listens when you speak, the way his meetings run longer when you're involved." She leaned closer. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" I really couldn't say. I see a threat. A pretty little nobody who thinks she can insert herself into something she doesn't understand. Genevieve's voice dropped to a whisper. "Dominic and I are building an empire together. We're partners in everything. And then you come along with your innocent eyes and your moral superiority, and suddenly he's questioning things, doubting, changing." Adelaide stood up, maintaining eye contact. "I'm his assistant. I'm here to do a job. Whatever relationship you have with Dominic is none of my business." "Everything about Dominic is my business. That's what it means to be his partner." Genevieve stood as well, forcing Adelaide to step back. "But you're smart, so let me make this very clear. You're here because Dominic finds you amusing. But amusement fades, and when it does, I'll still be over, and I have a very long memory." She walked to the door, then paused, looked back over her shoulder. "One more thing, standing up to me in a restaurant is one thing, but if you ever truly get in my way, you'll learn what real consequences look like." Her smile was ice and venom. "Ask around. Ask what happens to people who cross Genevieve Ashford." She left. Adelaide sank back into her chair, her hands finally starting to shake. The delayed reaction she'd been holding back. She had walked into the center of something dangerous, and she was beginning to understand that the real threat wasn't Dominic. It was the woman who stood beside him. That evening, Adelaide stayed late, not because she had work to do, but because she needed time to think, to process, to understand exactly what she'd gotten herself into. She was reviewing files when she heard it, soft crying coming from somewhere down the hall. Adelaide followed the sound to Dominic's private office. The door was slightly open. Inside, a little girl sat under the desk, knees pulled to her chest, crying silently. Adelaide knocked softly on the doorframe. The crying stopped immediately. "Hi there," she said gently. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't answer, didn't look up, just stayed curled under the desk like a small animal trying to be invisible. Adelaide had seen that posture before, in mirrors, in her own reflection, when she was young and scared and trying to disappear. She sat down on the floor a few feet away from the desk, Not approaching, not crowding, just being present. "My name is Adelaide," she said softly. "But most people call me Addie. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. Sometimes it's nice to just be quiet with someone." Silence. Then, slowly the little girl emerged from under the desk. She had dark curls and eyes that looked too old for her small face. 4 years old, maybe 5. Wearing pajamas with stars on them. "I'm Rosalie," she whispered. So quiet Adelaide almost didn't hear. "That's a beautiful name. Are you waiting for your daddy?" A small nod. "He'll be back soon. Do you want to wait together?" Another nod. Rosalie moved closer just a little. Adelaide stayed still, letting the child come to her in her own time. "My sister used to have bad dreams," Adelaide said. "When we were little, she'd wake up scared and I'd tell her stories until she felt safe again. Do you want to hear one?" Rosalie nodded again, and Adelaide began to speak. She told a story about stars that fell from the sky and turned into flowers, about brave girls who learned to fly, about finding family in unexpected places. By the time Dominic returned, Rosalie was sitting next to Adelaide, their shoulders barely touching. The little girl's eyes were starting to close. Dominic stood in the doorway, frozen. He looked at his daughter actually sitting with another person, something he clearly hadn't seen in a long time. His expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been pain. "She never," he started, then stopped. "She doesn't usually talk to strangers." "Or maybe she knows I am not a stranger," Adelaide said quietly. "I'm someone who understands what it's like to be scared." Rosalie's eyes opened. She looked at her father, then at Adelaide. "Stay," she whispered. "I have to go home tonight," Adelaide said gently. "But I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Promise." Adelaide looked at Dominic, saw something in his eyes that she couldn't name. Something vulnerable and desperate and hopeful. "Promise," she said. She helped Rosalie up, watched Dominic scoop his daughter into his arms. The little girl tucked her head against her father's shoulder but kept her eyes on Adelaide. "Thank you," Dominic said. 2 words, but the weight behind them was immense. Adelaide just nodded. She gathered her things, said goodnight and left. But as she walked to the elevator, she felt it. The shift. The change. She'd come here for a job, for money, for a chance to save her sister. But something else was happening. Something she hadn't planned for. She was starting to care. About Rosalie, who cried silently under desks and whispered promises. About Dominic, who looked at his daughter with love and guilt in equal measure. About this broken family that didn't know how to heal. And caring, Adelaide knew from long experience, was dangerous. Caring meant vulnerability. It meant having something to lose. But as she rode the elevator down 42 floors, Adelaide couldn't bring herself to regret it. She'd spent too much of her life protecting herself, building walls, staying safe. Maybe it was time to risk being human again. The elevator doors opened. Adelaide walked out into the Manhattan night. Above her, in an office 42 floors up, Genevieve Ashford watched security footage of Adelaide sitting on the floor with Rosalie. Watched the little girl lean against the stranger. Watched Dominic look at Adelaide like she was something precious. Genevieve's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm. Her smile was a thin line of rage. The game had changed. The waitress wasn't just an employee anymore. She was a threat, and Genevieve Ashford destroyed threats. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Silas," she said sweetly, "we need to talk. It's about Adelaide Thorne." Part 2. The Investigation. The nightmares started on Adelaide's 3rd week. Not hers, Rosalie's. The little girl would wake screaming at 2 in the morning, and somehow Adelaide always knew. She'd wake in her own apartment 7 miles away, heart-pounding phone already in her hand before it rang. Dominic's voice would come through tight with helplessness. "She's asking for you." And Adelaide would dress in the dark, catch a cab through empty streets, arrive at the penthouse where Dominic lived with his daughter and his ghosts. Rosalie would be tangled in sheets, face wet with tears, unable or unwilling to speak. Adelaide would sit on the edge of the small bed and tell stories in the dark about stars and flowers and brave girls who learned that fear couldn't touch them if they didn't give it permission. The first night, Rosalie just cried. The second night, she let Adelaide hold her hand. The third night, she whispered a single word, "Stay." By the end of the first week, Rosalie was falling asleep mid-story, her small hand wrapped around Adelaide's fingers. Adelaide would sit there until the little girl's breathing deepened until she was certain the nightmares wouldn't return. Then she'd slip out quietly, exchange a wordless nod with Dominic in the hallway, and go back to her own empty apartment. The second week, Rosalie started talking. Not much, just soft words. "Can you read the star story again? I like when you're here. Will you come back?" Always, Adelaide promised. Always. The third week, as Adelaide was tucking her in after a particularly bad nightmare, Rosalie looked up with those two old eyes and whispered, "Mama." Adelaide's heart stopped. She looked at the doorway where Dominic stood in shadow watching. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were wet. "No, sweetheart," Adelaide said gently, though something in her chest was cracking open. "I'm Addie. Just Addie. Mama Addie." Rosalie's voice was so small, so hopeful. Adelaide couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She just held the little girl and felt Dominic's presence in the doorway and understood that she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She cared about this child deeply, completely, in a way that terrified her. Rosalie fell asleep whispering "Mama Addie" over and over like a prayer. The days developed their own rhythm. Adelaide would arrive at the office. At 8, review contracts and correspondence, manage Dominic's increasingly complex schedule. Legitimate business, all of it. Real estate acquisitions in Brooklyn, shipping contracts for the docks, consulting agreements with companies that needed security or logistics expertise. But there were also the meetings she wasn't invited to, the phone calls Dominic took in Russian or Italian, the files that were never on her computer, the men who came and went through a different elevator wearing expensive suits and hard eyes. Adelaide understood the separation. There was the world she was allowed to see clean and legal and documented, and there was the world beneath the empire of shadows that Dominic ruled but never discussed with her. She respected that boundary. She had no desire to know about the violence and corruption that funded the legitimate businesses she managed. She was here for a job, for her sister's life, for survival. But her researcher instincts never really went to sleep. It started small. Patterns she noticed without meaning to. Silas Gray and Genevieve Ashford were always the last two people to leave Dominic's office after strategic meetings. They took phone calls at the same time, often within minutes of each other. They left the building heading in the same direction. Once was coincidence, twice was pattern. By the 7th time Adelaide observed it, her investigative training was screaming at her. She told herself it meant nothing. Silas was head of security. Genevieve was Dominic's fiancée. They probably coordinated on protection details or event planning or any of a dozen legitimate reasons. But her instincts whispered otherwise. She was working late on a Thursday, week 5 of her employment, reviewing an acquisition proposal for a warehouse complex in Red Hook when she heard them. Voices in the hallway, low and urgent. She recognized Silas's rumble immediately, and then Genevieve's laugh, soft and intimate in a way that made Adelaide's skin prickle. Adelaide stayed very still. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the door was open, and she couldn't help what she heard. "He's starting to trust her," Genevieve said. "Did you see how he looks at her like she's something precious?" Then we moved the timeline up. Silas's voice was cold, practical. "Before she becomes a real problem." She's already a problem. That little scene with Rosalie. Dominic's actually smiling again. It's disgusting. Jealous. Protective. A pause. Then softer, more intimate. "We've waited 7 years, Silas. I won't let some nobody waitress ruin this now." Their voices faded as they moved toward the elevators. Adelaide sat frozen at her desk, her mind racing. 7 years. They'd known each other for 7 years. And the way Genevieve said his name, the intimacy in her voice, the possessiveness. This wasn't professional coordination. This was personal. Adelaide opened her computer and did something she knew she shouldn't. She accessed the employee database searching for Silas Gray's hire date. Found it 8 years and 3 months ago. Before Genevieve. Before the engagement. Before everything. Her research instincts kicked into overdrive. This was a pattern. This meant something. She created a new file on her personal laptop, labeled it simply Observations, started documenting dates, times, behaviors, building a timeline the way she'd been trained at Meridian Financial. She was careful. She only accessed information she was authorized to see. She didn't hack, didn't break into files, didn't cross any lines that would get her fired or worse. She just observed, recorded, waited for more pieces to fall into place. But she wasn't careful enough. Because while Adelaide was watching Silas and Genevieve, they were watching her too. By week 6, Rosalie was transformed. Not completely, not suddenly, but in small beautiful ways. She started making eye contact more often. Started speaking in full sentences though, still softly. Started eating better, sleeping better, laughing occasionally at Adelaide's terrible jokes. One evening as Adelaide was reading a bedtime story, Rosalie interrupted. "Miss Addie." "Yes, sweetheart." "Why don't you have a little girl?" Adelaide's breath caught. I never had the chance, I guess." "You could have me," said so simply, so matter-of-factly. "I could be your little girl. And you could be my mama, not instead of my real mama, but also." Adelaide looked up. Dominic was standing in the doorway again. He'd been there a lot lately watching these moments. His expression was raw, vulnerable. "I would be honored," Adelaide said softly, "to be your mama, Addie, if your daddy says it's okay." Dominic's voice was rough when he spoke. "It's more than okay." Rosalie beamed, threw her arms around Adelaide's neck. "Mama Addie." That night, after Rosalie fell asleep, Adelaide found Dominic in the kitchen. He was making tea, his movements mechanical. When he heard her, he turned. "You brought her back," he said. His eyes were wet. "I thought I'd lost her when her mother died, but you brought her back." "She brought herself back," Adelaide said. "She just needed someone to make her feel safe." "She feels safe with you." Dominic moved closer. "And so do I." Adelaide's breath caught. He was standing very close now. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried, the man beneath the reputation. "You shouldn't," she said. "Feel safe with me. You barely know me." "I know enough." His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek so gently. It felt like a question. "I know you work until midnight, reviewing contracts to make sure I don't get cheated. I know you drop everything when my daughter has nightmares. I know you're brave and honest and everything good that I'm not." "Dominic, tell me to stop," he whispered. "Tell me this is wrong, that you're my employee, that I'm engaged to someone else. Tell me all the reasons this can't happen." Adelaide should have stepped back, should have maintained professional distance, but she didn't. "I can't," she admitted, "because I feel it too. Whatever this is, I feel it too." He leaned in. She rose on her toes. They were a breath apart. Dominic's phone rang. They both froze. Then pulled back, creating space, rebuilding walls. Dominic answered the phone, his expression shifting to cold professionalism. When he hung up, the moment was gone. "It's late," he said formally. "You should go home." Adelaide nodded, gathered her things. But as she left, she felt his eyes on her all the way to the elevator. Something had changed between them, something dangerous and powerful and impossible to take back. The following week, Adelaide's observations started forming a picture she didn't like. She'd documented 15 instances of Silas and Genevieve coordinating their movements. But it was more than that. There was something in the way they moved around each other, the careful distance they maintained in public, the way their eyes would meet across a room and hold just a fraction too long. Adelaide pulled up old employment records again. This time she went deeper. found that 3 months after Silas was hired by Dominic, he'd submitted an introduction request. Someone who could help with legitimate business expansion. Someone with connections in real estate and high society. Genevieve Ashford. Adelaide's blood went cold. She dug deeper. Found that before working for Dominic, Silas had been employed by the Moretti family. Everyone in New York knew the Morettis. They were Dominic's primary rivals. The two families had been fighting for control of the underworld for decades. Silas had worked for the Morettis for 6 months. Then he left. 3 months later, he applied to work for Dominic, got hired. 3 months after that, he introduced Genevieve. This wasn't coincidence. This was planning. Adelaide spent the next 3 days working late, cross-referencing everything she could access. Financial records, meeting logs, travel schedules, and she found discrepancies, small ones. 2.3 million in total over the past 2 years routed through offshore accounts via shell companies. The transactions were authorized with legitimate access codes. But they were suspicious, too regular, too careful, too hidden. Adelaide was good at her job, and her job at Meridian Financial had been finding exactly this kind of fraud. She started documenting everything, building a case. Not because she planned to do anything with it, but because her instincts told her something was very wrong and she needed to understand what. She was so focused on the evidence that she didn't notice she was being watched. Didn't notice that the security cameras captured her working late. Didn't notice that someone with access to those feeds was documenting her movements just as carefully as she was documenting theirs. Didn't notice the trap closing around her until it was too late. She arrived at the office on a Wednesday morning, week 8 of her employment, to find Dominic waiting. But his expression wasn't warm. It was cold, closed, the face he showed to enemies. Silas Gray stood beside him, arms crossed, watching her like a predator watching prey. Adelaide's stomach dropped. This was it. They'd found out about her file, about her observations, about her investigation. "Sit down, Adelaide," Dominic said. His voice was ice. She sat. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She forced herself to stay calm, to breathe, to think. Dominic slid a folder across the desk. "Care to explain these?" Adelaide opened the folder with hands that wanted to shake. Inside were bank statements. Financial transfers. $2.3 million moved from Dominic's accounts to offshore holdings. Every transfer authorized with access codes, every transaction routed through intermediary accounts, and every single offshore account was registered in Adelaide Thorne's name. Adelaide's vision tunneled. She forced herself to focus, to read, to analyze even as panic clawed at her throat. The transfers had started 3 months ago, before she was hired, before she'd even met Dominic. Someone had set up accounts in her name, used her social security number, created a perfect paper trail showing she was embezzling from Dominic Castellano. She turned the page. Security footage. Timestamps showing Adelaide accessing restricted files at 3 in the morning. Files she'd never opened. Computer logs showing her downloading sensitive information. Emails showing her corresponding with rival organizations offering to sell Dominic's secrets. All of it was perfect. All of it was damning. All of it was fake. Adelaide's mind raced through the evidence like she was back at Meridian Financial. The metadata on the financial transfers was subtly wrong, dates didn't quite align. The timestamps on the security footage had microsecond jumps that indicated editing. The email headers showed burner accounts registered with sloppy proxies. Someone had framed her, and they'd done it well. But not perfectly. "I didn't do this," she said quietly. Looked up at Dominic, held his gaze. "And you know I didn't." "Do I?" His voice was razor sharp. "Because the evidence says otherwise. The evidence is fabricated." Adelaide's voice was steady even though her world was crumbling. "The metadata on these transfers is wrong. Look at the timestamps. They don't align with the transaction dates. The security footage has editing jumps. The email accounts are registered with careless proxies." But she pointed to specific details. explaining each discrepancy with the precision of someone who'd spent years investigating financial fraud. Dominic listened, his expression unreadable. Silas watched with cold eyes, his jaw tight. "Give me 48 hours, Adelaide said. "Let me prove these are fake." "Why should I?" Dominic's words were hard, brutal. "Why should I give you anything?" "Because I've never lied to you, not once." Adelaide's voice shook but didn't break. "You hired me because I told you the truth when it could have destroyed me. I'm telling you the truth now. Someone set me up. Someone who wants me gone. Someone who has access to your systems and knows how to manipulate evidence." She didn't say Silas and Genevieve. "Not yet. Not without proof. And if you believe I'm capable of betraying you like this," Adelaide continued, meeting his eyes, "then you never really knew me at all." Silence stretched between them. Adelaide could see the war happening behind Dominic's eyes. Trust battling doubt, hope fighting fear. Everything they'd built in 8 weeks balanced against evidence that looked damning. Finally, he nodded. Once. Sharp. 48 hours. But if you run, Adelaide, I will find you. I'm not going anywhere. She stood, gathered the folder. Because I'm going to prove someone is trying to destroy me. And when I do, you'll know exactly who you can't trust. She walked out with her head high and her hands steady. Made it to the street. It was only then that her legs started shaking. 48 hours to prove her innocence. 48 hours to uncover a conspiracy. 48 hours before Dominic Castellano decided whether she lived or died. Adelaide pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. Called the only person she could trust. "Daniel Park," the voice answered. "Daniel, it's Adelaide. I need your help, and I need it now." They met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Daniel Park looked the same as Adelaide remembered from Meridian Financial. Serious, focused, brilliant at forensic data analysis. He'd been her mentor when she started, and she'd once saved his career by finding evidence that cleared him of insider trading accusations. "This is dangerous, Adelaide," Daniel said, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup. "Dominic Castellano isn't someone you mess with." "I'm not messing with him. I'm trying to save my life." Adelaide slid her laptop across. "I need you to analyze these files. Someone faked all of it, and I need to prove how." Daniel opened the folder. She watched his face go pale as he registered what he was looking at. "Adelaide, this is sophisticated. Whoever did this had access to serious resources. Can you trace it?" "I can try, but this is going to take time." "We don't have time. We have 36 hours. Adelaide leaned forward. "Please, Daniel, you're the best forensic analyst I know. If anyone can crack this, it's you." He looked at her, really looked, saw the desperation, the fear, the determination. "You really didn't do this." "I really didn't." "Okay." He pulled the laptop closer. "Let's figure out who did." They worked through the night. Daniel dissected the files, while Adelaide took notes, asked the questions, pushed him to dig deeper. The coffee shop closed at midnight. They moved to Daniel's apartment, spread documents across his dining table, and kept going. The financial transfers were the first breakthrough. Daniel traced the access codes used to authorize the transactions. They were legitimate codes belonging to Silas Gray's security clearance, but they'd been used remotely from an IP address that wasn't Silas's usual computer. Someone cloned his credentials, Daniel said, around 3 in the morning. Used them to make the transfers look internally authorized. But they got sloppy here. The IP trace goes back to a shell company. Adelaide's pulse quickened. "Can you trace the shell company?" "Already on it." Daniel pulled up corporate registration documents. The shell company was registered in Delaware under a generic name, but the registration used a credit card for filing fees. That card was linked to an account in Genevieve Ashford's maiden name, Whitmore. Adelaide stared at the screen. Genevieve. The security footage was next. It had been professionally edited but not perfectly. Daniel found frame rate inconsistencies, lighting adjustments that were too smooth, metadata showing the file had been processed through editing software registered to the same Delaware shell company. The burner phone emails were the sloppiest part. The accounts had been created using anonymous services, but the registration required phone verification. That number had been purchased with a credit card registered to Silas Gray. By 6 in the morning, they had a picture. Not complete, but clear enough. Someone with access to Silas's credentials and Genevieve's resources had framed Adelaide. "Why you?" Daniel asked. "Why would they target you specifically?" Adelaide thought about the overheard conversation, about 7 years of waiting, about the way Genevieve's voice went soft when she said Silas's name, about patterns she'd been documenting. "Because I've been watching them," she said slowly, "documenting their movements, using my research training. What if they're not just co-workers? What if they're working together against Dominic?" "That's a big accusation." "I know." Adelaide pulled up her observations file, showed Daniel the timeline she'd been building. "But look at this, they coordinate everything. They're always together, and they've known each other for over 7 years. Daniel's fingers flew over the keyboard. "If you're right, there might be more. Encrypted communications. Let me see what I can find." He worked for 2 more hours, breaking through security protocols, accessing systems that Adelaide knew she shouldn't be accessing. But desperation made criminals of everyone. At 8:30, Daniel sat back. "Adelaide, you need to see this." On his screen were encrypted messages between Genevieve and Silas, going back 2 years. Adelaide read them with growing horror. The messages were careful, coded, but clear enough. References to the plan and when he trusts us completely, and moving the timeline. Discussions about offshore accounts, instructions about eliminating obstacles, and underneath it all, intimacy, pet names, references to what we had before, and second chances, and for us. "They're lovers," Adelaide whispered. "They've been planning this for years. Not just lovers. Look." Daniel pulled up more files. These messages reference a relationship going back at least 10 years. Before Castellano. Before everything. Adelaide's mind raced. Silas and Genevieve knew each other. Then something happened. They broke up. Silas ended up working for the Moretti's Dominic's rivals. Then he got an idea. He could plant himself in Dominic's organization, bring Genevieve in, wait until they were trusted completely, then take everything. Daniel nodded grimly. "And you got in the way. You started noticing patterns, started documenting, so they framed you before you could figure it out." Adelaide checked her watch. 28 hours left. She scrolled through more messages looking for the end game. Found it. Dated 3 weeks ago. "The offshore accounts are ready. 52 MMPs transferred so far. Once we eliminate the obstacles, we move to phase 3. Remember why we started this for us, for what we deserved for revenge." "This isn't just about money," Adelaide said. "They want to destroy Dominic." Daniel pointed to another message. "They're planning something big, a final move, but it doesn't say what." Adelaide compiled everything into a single encrypted file. Every piece of evidence, every email, every timeline, every connection. It wasn't complete, but it was enough. Enough to prove her innocence. Enough to show Dominic who his real enemies were. She looked at Daniel. "Thank you. I need to go." "Adelaide." He caught her arm. "Be careful. If they find out you know, they'll try to kill me anyway. At least this way I'll take them down with me." She left Brooklyn as the sun climbed toward noon. 36 hours since the confrontation. 12 hours left on Dominic's deadline. Adelaide rode the subway back to Manhattan, the encrypted drive in her bag, feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This was it. The moment of truth. Either Dominic would believe her or she was dead. She arrived at 525 Fifth Avenue at 2 in the afternoon. The receptionist looked at her with something like pity. Adelaide walked into Dominic's office without knocking. He was there standing by the windows looking out at the city. He turned when she entered. His face was haggard. He hadn't slept. Neither had she. Silas Gray was there too, and Genevieve sitting in one of the leather chairs, looking cool and composed and certain of her victory. Adelaide held up the encrypted drive. "Read it," she said to Dominic. "All of it, and then you'll know exactly who you can't trust." She set it on his desk, walked to the window, looked out at the city she'd been fighting to survive in, and waited. Dominic picked up the drive. inserted it into his computer, started reading. Adelaide watched his reflection in the window, watched his expression shift from skepticism to shock to devastation to a cold, terrible rage. He read for 20 minutes. Every email, every timeline, every piece of evidence Adelaide and Daniel had compiled through the night. When he finished, he looked up. His eyes found Silas first, then Genevieve. 8 years, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. 8 years you've been planning this. Silas's face remained impassive. Genevieve had gone white. You introduced her to me. Dominic continued looking at Silas. I trusted you with my life, with my daughter, and you brought her into my world so you could destroy me. Dominic, Genevieve started. Don't. The single word cracked like a whip. Don't say my name. Don't pretend. Don't lie anymore. He stood, walked to the window. Adelaide saw his shoulders trembling, saw the man beneath the reputation crumbling under the weight of betrayal. She moved without thinking, placed her hand on his arm, felt him flinch, then still. I should have seen it, he said quietly, only to her. All the signs were there. They were very good, Adelaide said. They played a long game, but they made mistakes, and I found them. Dominic turned, looked at her. You had 12 hours left. You could have run. I don't run, and I keep my promises. She held his gaze. I told you I'd prove it was fake. I did. Now you know the truth. Something shifted in his eyes. Gratitude, respect, and underneath it, something that looked like hope. He turned back to Silas and Genevieve. Get out, both of you. You're done here. You can't prove any of this, Genevieve said. But her voice shook. I don't need to prove it. I know it. That's enough. Dominic's voice was ice. Get out. And if I ever see either of you again, I won't be this merciful. Silas stood. Genevieve followed. But as they left, Adelaide saw the look Silas shot her. Pure hatred. Pure promise of violence. This wasn't over. Not even close. The door closed. Adelaide and Dominic stood alone in the office. They won't just walk away, Adelaide said quietly. They'll come after you, after me, after Rosalie. I know. Dominic moved to his desk, picked up his phone, but before he could make a call, Adelaide spoke. What are you going to do? He looked at her for a long moment, then made a decision. Something I should have done years ago. He dialed. When someone answered, he said, This is Dominic Castellano. I want to speak with federal prosecutors. I have information, and I want a deal. Adelaide's eyes widened. Dominic, I'm tired, Adelaide. Tired of this life. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering when someone will use Rosalie against me. He looked at her. I want out. Really out. And the only way out is through them. They'll want everything, I know. And I'm ready to give it. His jaw tightened. But first we deal with Silas and Genevieve. Once they're in custody, once you and Rosalie are safe, I'll give the FBI my empire. Over the next 10 days, while pretending to be broken, Dominic met with federal prosecutors in secret, negotiated immunity for himself and Adelaide, protection for Rosalie, the price complete cooperation, every name, every operation, every piece of evidence he had. The deal was struck on day 8. Publicly, Adelaide and Dominic maintained the fiction that their relationship had been destroyed. Adelaide moved to a new apartment in Queens, made a show of looking for other work, acted like a woman who'd been cast out. Meanwhile, Silas and Genevieve grew reckless, started moving money more openly, contacted rivals, planned their final move, a heist that would give them enough capital to disappear forever. But while they planned, Adelaide and Dominic worked in shadows, meeting in safe houses, warehouses in Brooklyn, coffee shops in Queens, building their case, gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And one night in a warehouse in Red Hook, reviewing documents by lamplight, Dominic stopped working and just looked at her. If this goes wrong, he started, if they realize what we're doing, they'll come for me first. Adelaide finished. I know. I have accepted that risk. Why would you risk everything for someone like me? Adelaide set down her papers, looked at him in the dim light. Because you're not the monster everyone thinks you are. Because underneath all this, you're just someone trying to survive. Because your daughter calls me mama and that means something. Dominic reached out, touched her face. His fingers were gentle, asking permission. Adelaide, he said. Just her name. But the way he said it held everything. She moved closer. So did he. And when they kissed, it felt like falling and flying at the same time. Like finding something she hadn't known she was looking for. When they pulled apart, Dominic's expression was serious. Raw. When this is over, we'll figure it out, Adelaide finished. But first we have to survive. They went back to work, setting their trap, waiting. And 2 days later at 3 in the morning, Adelaide's phone rang. Dominic's voice was pure ice. They took her. They took Rosalie. Adelaide's world stopped. What? Ransom note. My empire or my daughter. 2 hours. His voice cracked. Adelaide, they took my daughter. I'm coming. Where are you? Home. But don't. Adelaide was already moving. Already getting dressed. Already running. Because this was it. The end game. The moment they'd been preparing for. Except Silas and Genevieve had changed the rules. They hadn't just gone after Dominic's empire. They'd gone after his heart. Part 3, The Reckoning. Adelaide's lungs burned as she ran up the steps of Dominic's building. 3:48 a.m. The city was dead silent. Every second that passed was a second Rosalie was terrified. Every heartbeat was one the little girl spent crying for someone to save her. The penthouse door was open. Adelaide burst through to find Dominic standing in his living room, holding a piece of paper in hands that shook. His face was a mask of controlled devastation. Dominic. Adelaide crossed to him, took the ransom note from his trembling fingers. Your empire or your daughter. Sign over control of all operations. Transfer all offshore accounts. You have 2 hours. Instructions will follow. If you contact police, she dies. If you come armed, she dies. If you don't come alone, she dies. Choose wisely. S.S. Silas. Adelaide read it twice. Her mind shifted into analytical mode, looking for patterns, for mistakes, for anything they could use. When did this arrive? She asked. 23 minutes ago. Slipped under the door. Dominic's voice was hollow. They have her, Adelaide. They have my daughter and I don't know where. Stop. Adelaide grabbed his shoulders, made him look at her. Stop. We're going to get her back. Do you hear me? We're going to bring Rosalie home. How if I give them what they want, they'll kill us both. If I don't, we give them what they think they want. There's a difference. Adelaide moved to the window thinking. They want you broken, desperate, making mistakes. We don't give them that. Adelaide, I am broken. I know, but you're also smart and you have resources. She turned back. 2 hours means they need time to set up, which means they're probably still in the city, probably somewhere they feel secure. Dominic pulled out his phone, started making calls, mobilizing his network. Within 10 minutes, he had information. Red Hook, warehouse complex near the docks. Silas accessed it 6 hours ago. Genevieve's car pinged there 90 minutes ago. That's our location. Adelaide was already planning. We need to get there before they're ready, before they expect us. They said come alone. You will. I'll come separately. Adelaide met his eyes. Do you trust me? With my life, with Rosalie's life. Then here's what we're going to do. They moved fast. Dominic assembled a small team, 6 men loyal to him personally, people Silas didn't know about. Adelaide changed into dark clothes. Dominic tried to give her a gun. I don't know how to use it, she said. I'd be more dangerous to us than them. Adelaide, I'm not helpless. I know CPR. I can think under pressure. And I'm not letting anything happen to Rosalie. She looked at him. Or to you. They left separately. Dominic in his obvious Mercedes, Adelaide in an unmarked car with 2 of his men. Different roads to Red Hook. Adelaide's watch read 5:32 when they arrived. 90 minutes since the ransom note. 28 minutes left. The warehouse district was industrial. Abandoned, dark. Adelaide and her escorts parked 3 blocks away. moved through shadows toward the warehouse Silas had accessed. The building was massive. Old brick, broken windows, one entrance showing recent use. "We go in quiet," Adelaide whispered. "Find Rosalie first. Everything else comes after." They entered through a side door. Inside the warehouse was a maze of shipping containers and old machinery. Adelaide moved carefully, every sense alert. She heard voices. Male. Coming from deeper inside. She gestured for her escorts to circle around. She would approach directly. Adelaide crept closer, peered around a container, and saw her, Rosalie, tied to a chair, 4 years old and terrified, tape over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, but alive, conscious. Silas stood nearby, checking his watch. Genevieve paced, 4 armed men positioned around the space. "He's late," Genevieve said. "He should be here." "He'll come. Fathers always come for their children." Silas smiled, cold. "And when he does, we take everything. His empire, his money, and the satisfaction of watching him break before we kill him." Adelaide's blood went ice. They weren't honoring any deal. They were planning murder. She heard it then. An engine, Dominic's Mercedes, right on time, right into the trap. Adelaide made a decision. She stepped out from behind the container, walked into the open with her hands visible and empty. "I'm here for the girl," she said clearly. Every gun swung toward her. Silas's eyes widened. Genevieve's face twisted with rage. "You," Genevieve hissed. "You should be dead, destroyed. You tried. You failed." Adelaide kept walking toward Rosalie, slowly. "Let her go. She's 4 years old. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this." Silas blocked Adelaide's path. "She's the leverage. Then take me instead. I'm the one who exposed you. I'm the one who ruined your plan. I'm the one you really want." Outside, a car door slammed. Footsteps. Dominic walking into the trap as instructed. "You're nothing," Silas said, pulling his gun, pointing it at Adelaide's chest. A nobody waitress who thought she could challenge Genevieve. A fool who thought she could investigate us. "Maybe," Adelaide said, "but this nobody destroyed your 7-year plan in 10 days. This fool gave Dominic everything he needed to know exactly who you are." Dominic appeared in the warehouse entrance, stopped when he saw the scene. Adelaide standing in the open, Rosalie tied to a chair, Silas with a gun aimed at Adelaide's heart. "Let them both go," Dominic said. His voice was eerily calm. "Take the empire, take the money, just let them go." "That's not how this works," Genevieve said. She was smiling now, victorious. "You sign over everything, transfer the accounts, then we decide who lives and who dies." "I'll sign. I'll transfer. Whatever you want." Dominic moved closer. "Just don't hurt them." Adelaide saw it then, the way Dominic's hand moved, the signal they'd planned. His team was in position, outside, waiting, but inside they were still outnumbered, still outgunned. Adelaide needed to create an opening, needed to do something unexpected. She looked at Rosalie. The little girl's eyes were wide with terror. But when she saw Adelaide, something changed. Recognition, hope, trust. Adelaide remembered, years ago, foster home. Harper stepping between Adelaide and their foster father's fist, protecting her even though it meant pain. Adelaide had spent her life being protected, being saved. Not anymore. "Silas," she said, "before you pull that trigger, answer one question. Was it worth it? 7 years of your life dedicated to revenge. Is this who you wanted to become?" Silas's expression darkened. "You don't know anything. I know you loved Genevieve. I know something went wrong. I know you spent years trying to get back to her." Adelaide gestured around the warehouse. "But look at what you became. You're pointing guns at a 4-year-old. Is this what you wanted? Is this worth your soul?" "Shut up!" Genevieve snapped, but something flickered in Silas's eyes. Doubt, or regret, or the ghost of the man he used to be. Adelaide moved, not toward the gun, toward Rosalie. She threw herself between Silas and the child, grabbed the chair, tilted it backward, taking Rosalie down behind a container. Gunfire erupted, but not from inside, from outside. Dominic's team breaching the perimeter, windows shattering, doors crashing, flashbangs exploding with light and sound. Adelaide covered Rosalie's body with her own, felt the chair legs dig into her ribs, heard bullets ricocheting off metal, heard shouting and chaos. Strong hands grabbed her, pulled her and Rosalie behind better cover. One of Dominic's men, his face grim. "Stay down." Adelaide worked at Rosalie's restraints, got the tape off the little girl's mouth. Rosalie immediately started crying. "Mama, I've got you, baby. I've got you. You're safe." The firefight lasted maybe 90 seconds. When it ended, 3 of Silas's men were down. The 4th had surrendered. Dominic's team had the warehouse secured, but Silas and Genevieve were gone. Adelaide held Rosalie tight. "Where's your daddy?" "We need to find your daddy." "Here." Dominic appeared through the smoke. His suit was torn, blood on his face from a cut above his eye, but alive, moving. He saw his daughter safe in Adelaide's arms, and his expression crumbled. "Rosalie." "Daddy." The little girl reached for him. Dominic took her from Adelaide, held his daughter like she was the only thing keeping him alive. "She's okay," Adelaide said. "Scared, but okay. Because of you." Dominic looked at Adelaide over Rosalie's head. "You saved her." Again. One of Dominic's men approached. "Boss, we've got them cornered. Backloading dock. They're trapped, but armed." Dominic handed Rosalie back to Adelaide. "Stay here. Keep her safe." "Dominic, I'm ending this." He was already moving toward the back of the warehouse. 5 minutes passed like hours. Adelaide held, Rosalie whispered comfort, tried not to think about bullets and blood. Then Dominic returned, but he wasn't alone. Police, federal agents, people in FBI jackets, and behind them in handcuffs, Silas Gray and Genevieve Ashford. Adelaide stared. "What?" "I made my deal," Dominic said quietly. He knelt beside Adelaide and Rosalie. 3 days ago, I gave them everything. All of it. The illegal operations, the evidence, everything I've built, in exchange for immunity and protection for you and Rosalie. "Dominic, I'm done, Adelaide. Out. No more empire. No more violence." He took her hand. "I choose you. I choose Rosalie. I choose a life that isn't built on fear." Genevieve was screaming as agents led her away. 8 years, 8 years. This wasn't supposed to happen. Silas said nothing, just looked at Dominic with something that might have been respect or acknowledgement that he'd been beaten. An FBI agent approached. "Mr. Castellano, Miss Thorne, we'll need statements, but tomorrow, go home, be with your daughter." They left the warehouse as dawn broke. Dominic drove them back to his penthouse. Adelaide gave Rosalie a bath, washed away the terror, dressed her in clean pajamas, put her to bed. "Mama, stay," Rosalie whispered. "Always," Adelaide promised. "Always." When she emerged, Dominic was on the balcony. Dawn light painted the city gold. He looked exhausted, but also lighter, like he'd been carrying weight so long he'd forgotten what freedom felt like. Adelaide joined him. "You really gave it all up?" "Every bit. I'm cooperating fully with the investigation. I'll testify, provide evidence, and then I'm out." He turned to her. "I meant what I said. I'm done with that life. I want something honest, something I can be proud of when Rosalie asks what I do." "What will you do?" "I don't know yet. Something legitimate." He moved closer. "Something that doesn't make me ashamed." "She loves you," Adelaide said. "No matter what you did, you're her father. And you're her mother." Dominic's voice was rough. "She's called you that for weeks, and I've watched you risk your life for her. I don't deserve you, Adelaide. I don't deserve either of you. But I'm asking anyway." He pulled something from his pocket. A small box. "I know the timing is terrible. I know we should wait. I know there are 1,000 reasons this is too fast." Who opened the box? A simple ring. Beautiful. But I've learned that life is short and tomorrow isn't promised. And when you find someone who makes you want to be better, you don't let them go. Adelaide's breath caught. Marry me, Dominic said. Not because of obligation or fear or convenience, because I choose you, because you challenged me to be someone different, because I love you. Adelaide looked at the ring, at this man who'd given up an empire for his daughter, who'd risked everything to protect them, who was trying every day to be better. I have conditions, she said. Name them. No more lies, no more secrets. You're all the way out or I walk. Done. And we build something honest, something clean, something we can be proud of. I promise. Then yes, Adelaide smiled through tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be Rosalie's mother. Yes, I choose this. I choose you. I choose us. He slid the ring on her finger, kissed her like she was precious, like she was hope, like she was everything that mattered. Inside, Rosalie stirred, called out softly, Mama. They both went to her, together, a family. 3 months passed in a blur of court dates and testimony. The federal case against Genevieve and Silas became the biggest organized crime prosecution in New York history. 47 arrests. Dominic's testimony was devastating, complete. He gave them everything he knew. In exchange, he got immunity, protection, his freedom. He sold his legitimate businesses, donated half the proceeds to victims of organized crime, set up trust funds for Rosalie and Adelaide, started over. Harper's recovery was complete. She visited, often healthy and glowing, watching Adelaide with Dominic and Rosalie, with tears in her eyes. You did it, Harper said one afternoon. You saved me. You saved them. You saved yourself. We saved each other, Adelaide corrected. That's what family does. On a sunny Saturday in June, Adelaide married Dominic in a garden in Brooklyn. Small ceremony, 40 guests. Harper as maid of honor, Daniel Park there grinning, Rosalie as flower girl scattering petals and laughing. The vows were simple. You saw the worst of me and offered me a chance to be better, Dominic said. You challenged me, changed me, saved me. I choose you, Adelaide, every day, forever. Adelaide's hands trembled. You gave me family. You protected me. You chose truth over empire. You're my home, my partner, my love. I choose you too. They kissed. Rosalie cheered. Mama and Daddy are married. 2 years later, Adelaide stood in their suburban kitchen, one hand on her pregnant belly, watching through the window as Dominic pushed Rosalie on the backyard swing. The house was modest. 3 bedrooms, small yard. Nothing like the Manhattan penthouse, but it was theirs, bought with honest money, filled with laughter. Dominic ran a security consulting firm now, helping legitimate businesses, using his knowledge for good. Home by 5 every evening. Never missed Rosalie's bedtime. Adelaide had opened Thorn investigations, helping fraud victims, building cases, using her skills to help people who couldn't help themselves. That evening, they gathered for dinner, Harper and her fiancé. Rosalie now, 6, chattering about school. Adelaide's hand on her belly where their son kicked. This was everything Adelaide had never let herself dream about. Family, home, safety, love. After dinner, after Harper left, after Rosalie was in bed, Adelaide and Dominic sat on their porch swing. Fireflies danced in the yard. Ordinary suburban peace. Are you happy? Dominic asked. Terrified, Adelaide admitted. A baby. Another life to protect. You won't mess him up. I might. I never had parents who showed me how. Neither did I. But we have each other and we have Rosalie. He pulled her close and she turned out amazing. They rocked gently. Adelaide thought about the journey. From a restaurant where she'd refused to kneel, to a warehouse where she'd chosen to be brave, to this porch swing where she'd found everything that mattered. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Giving up the empire? Never. I was dying in that life, Adelaide. You showed me there was another way. He kissed her temple. You're my home. You and Rosalie. And this life we're building. Inside, Rosalie called out in her sleep, not a nightmare, just dreaming. Mama's here, Daddy's here, I'm safe. And she was. They all were. Years later, when Adelaide's son asked how she met his father, she didn't talk about the restaurant or the warehouse or the investigation. She talked about choice. Courage isn't something you have, she told him. It's something you do. Every time you choose truth over fear, you become braver. And every time you stand up for what's right, you become someone who can't be controlled by fear. She looked out at Dominic, teaching Rosalie to drive, at Harper with her family, at the life they'd all built. I tell anyone who's scared that the greatest love stories often start with the bravest confrontations, that standing up isn't selfishness, it's survival, and that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose. Her son hugged her. I'm glad you chose Dad. Me too, baby. Me too. And she was, every single day. Adelaide Thorne had started as a waitress who dared to challenge a queen. She'd become a mother, a wife, an investigator, a woman who'd saved lives and changed their destinies. But most importantly, she'd become someone who knew her own worth, who refused to let fear make her choices, who chose courage every single day. That was the real victory, not the arrests or the justice or the happy ending, but the knowledge that she'd looked fear in the face and said no, that she'd chosen truth when lies were easier, that she'd loved when love felt impossible. She'd chosen, and her choice had changed everything.